Hello and welcome to another video in my series about using Ancestry to find the place of origin of a Swedish ancestor. Today I am talking about my favorite record set in Ancestry, Sweden Emigrants Registered in Church Books. I consider this Ancestry's secret weapon for helping you break through that brick wall of figuring out where your Swedish ancestor came from. First, I'll be explaining what this record set is, and more importantly, to give you some tips for how to successfully search for the records you are looking for. This is Ancestry's own description of this record set. What they have done is gone into the handwritten church records, the books that listed all the people leaving the parishes, and also the household records that traced people's movements from year to year. They compiled all of that and indexed it. It is not complete, as it says, but my experience is I very rarely am not able to find one of these records for somebody. So this is why I always recommend that for this kind of a search that you go to Ancestry, even if only for a short term. These records will always include the parish that they were born in, and it will always include the parish from which they left. It also gives exact birth dates. It's an extremely useful tool. The fact that it's all been indexed saves everybody a lot of time trying to hunt things down if you have little knowledge of where your ancestor came from. Anyway, I could go on and on extolling the virtues of this record set, but let's move on to how you actually put this into practice. Here I have the profile of someone that I worked with once, and I made a duplicate record for him and stripped it down to just a few data points to try to simulate a situation where you're working with an ancestor, you know some things, but you haven't been able to figure out where in Sweden they came from. So I've set the birth as September 1864, so no exact date, but I do have a month. The name as he used it in the US, and then I have a marriage of July 1888 in Iowa. Now this is interesting from a few points. One is Iowa did have state censuses. So even though there were no federal censuses between 1880 and 1900, this person lived in one of the states that had state censuses. So we see that he was there in 88 to get married, but there was nothing found for him in 1885 in the census records. Now, that could mean that he had come in with a different name and used a different name in 85, but for now I'm going to assume that's not the case, that we're going to be able to narrow down our search to sometime entry into the US between 1885, late in the year after the census was taken, and 1888 when he got married. So that will help us tremendously, of course. Now, every case is different, so obviously you may be working with different data points. The point I'm trying to make is try to think about things like this. Anything that will help you narrow down anything, narrow down a date of birth, a place, an immigration year, any of these things. So do your research first on the US side as much as you can, get as much information as you can, and then with that, plug that into this index, and it will have much better chance of success. The goal is to find, even if you can't find the person right off the bat, and be confident that you found the right record, if you can at least narrow it down to a few candidates, then by going into the Swedish church books, you can continue your research and help eliminate people or confirm them. I won't go into that process right now. This is purely about tips for how to search this particular record set. So with that in mind, I'm going to go up to the main search area. We'll be working on the left-hand side, mostly in this area here. This is where one can change the search parameters. And what I always do is first set the focus to Sweden, and then I choose the record set that we will be looking for. So go down to Immigration, Immigration Books, and then this one here. And then it will only be looking for those records, which is helpful. Already weeds out a lot of other stuff. So let's go into the search area here. By choosing that record set from the very beginning, you get different boxes to fill in. For one thing, it will allow an exact birth date, whereas if you don't do that, depending on what filter you've set, you can only put in a year. It will already add search boxes for departure, which is of course what we need, and arrival. So we can just start right away, fixing or setting things the way we want them. Before we do that, I wanted to go up here, this little warning or whatever up here. It suggests using Swedish words and location spellings. That is, in my experience, not absolutely crucial. The algorithm does a really good job of fuzzy logic and trying to figure out what you're looking for. So I'm going to go down the list one by one. I'm not going to change a lot to begin with, just so we see what happens when you just take what it gives you. We'll talk about the names later. I'm going to leave it like this for now. It's going to recognize John as a possibility for Swedish name. The birthday, I'm going to let it, it's already pulled it in from the profile. I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to set it for exact because we do need to have some data points that are a little more solid. The location has been put in already, and the arrival, you don't want to use USA because that would not be on the Swedish records. Sometimes it shows up in Ancestry in parentheses, but I would leave it blank. North America could also work, but I think it's best to leave it open so it nets everything, every possibility. And, people who are going to Australia or somewhere else, it's pretty easy to just ignore those. There's not that many. The departure is an important one. We've already ascertained that it would be between 1885 and 1888. So if we put in 1887 and set it for plus minus 2, yeah, I always waffle on this one. Sometimes it's better to set things year by year. Sometimes you want to open it up a little bit. So for now, we're going to add a couple of years, and we can always go back to individual years later. Departure location, this might be a bit confusing. It's referring to the place where they were living when they left Sweden, not the port of departure. So that would be, in ideal case, the parish and the county where they were living when they left Sweden. But even if you don't know the parish, if you do know what county they were living in, then certainly put that in. But be careful because it has to be the county and not the province. If you're not sure what I mean about the difference between county and province, I have a video about that, and there are also good resources on the Family Search Research Wiki pages. Right now I'm going to leave it blank. The any event, we don't need it for these purposes. I've gone over all of that, I think. So let's just do a search with those parameters. All right, well, we have one. one person doesn't even have a September birth date. So this shows you already something about the algorithm. It will prioritize a September 64 if there are any. If there aren't, then it just sort of automatically opens it up a little bit and tries to give you some other suggestions. So for our purposes, we're going to ignore this one. I would also, rule out anybody with a double first name. Unless you have evidence that there was a double name at some point, I would rule out these people. It does sometimes happen that a person's born with a double first name and then kicks it out once they get to the US, but I wouldn't start with that assumption. What else can I point out here? Departure 87 matches, of course, what we had said. So with only one, and it doesn't look like a really good one, I'm not sure it's going to help to change any other parameters because, yeah, we've pretty much narrowed down the departure time frame. And for these purposes, I want to keep the September 64 as a known. So we have at least one known. All right, so with that, I will start playing with names. Now this is where it can get really tricky. I've prepared a reference guide as a companion to this video where I go through all of these different possibilities for the parameters of all of the different fields. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. I will put the link to that in the description. For now, I will just go over briefly some of the things, some of the reasons for why I do what I do. So let's start with the last name. There are multiple reasons why a last name that's in the US is not going to match a Swedish record. Obviously, the main one is somebody changes their name, which is probably what happened in this case. The other one is if children come in with their parents, they will almost always adopt the surname that the father chooses once they come to the States. So that will cause a mismatch. Women are especially difficult because you, in most cases, won't even have an idea what their last name was. Then, of course, there are spelling differences and all of that. So what I usually do is, especially for men, is I take out, well, that's not true, for women too, but I start by taking out the last name. So that's what I'm going to do here, take out the last name. Now for the first name, some of them are easy, some of them are not. Andrew, Anders. Erik, Erik. I mean, those are simple. The women tend to use more nicknames or shortened names. Margareta becomes Greta. Elisabeth becomes Lisa. These shortened names will also appear in Swedish records. With the men, not so much. I think most of their names are, it's interesting. They don't seem to have much variation, but the women's names, quite a few. So this is where wildcards are going to be necessary. For the word John, it's also complicated. There are multiple Johns. There's Jonas, there's Jon, there's Jan, there's Johan, there's Johannes, Jöns. It goes on and on and on. So you can start with the sounds like and similar. In this particular case, I am going to use a wildcard. And I'm going to put in the star there. So that should pick up a Johan, a Jon, a Jan, well, Jan, J-A-N, which is a shortened form of Johannes. So that is one where that name can get shortened, the men's name. The other thing I'm going to do is change our departure to exact, because with a 3-year split, it'll be more difficult to sort through them. So we'll do it year by year. what it will do is it will prioritize the 87 departure date coupled with a September birth date. So that's what we're looking for now, are the September birth dates. And once we get past those, then we can rule out the rest. Okay, here's the last one. So it's quite a few, but most of them have a double first name. And we've already said we're going to rule those out. So we have this one here. And we have this one here. This one, not necessarily, because to me it would seem illogical to change a unique name to another unique name. So far we have 2 candidates, 3 candidates. Now possibly there'll be something in those records that will already alert you to the fact that it's not the right person. And of course you also want to make sure all of these were going to America. I see one Germany in there, but basically otherwise yes. So for 87 you already have a few possible candidates. Now this might sound like really a lot, but in actuality, as you go in and start researching these, a lot of times you'll very quickly find that they are somebody else because other people in Ancestry have researched them. So it's usually not such a big problem to have, several candidates. You can rule them out pretty quickly. So if we go to 1888 and do the same thing, so that would be the process. Now you can see I looked at this one once, and I'm sorry, my mouse, I don't have good control over my mouse. So here's another one. So by just attaching one of these records into Ancestry will let you do that. If you start your own, start a special research tree, you can throw anybody into that tree. It doesn't have to be related to somebody you already have. So you just take this record, attach it into Ancestry, that creates the profile, you research it, and very often you'll find out, oops, this person ended up somewhere else. And then you go down your list. So that takes care of that name with that wild card, but then you'd have to start over again with Jonas and Jens. There are probably fewer of those. So we only have 60 of those total. That catches also Johannes with an S at the end. This is not even a September birth date. So we've only got 3 here. Johannes Nilsson, and these 2 I would kick out. Well, that one not. So there you go. I hope that explains the process. Obviously, every research problem is going to be different. But just to recap, leaving off the last name can be helpful. Sometimes the opposite is true. The last name is obvious, but you're having trouble with the first name. The birth, oh yeah, of course, if you have an exact birth date, then absolutely, then I would not put any exact departure in at all, because an exact birth date should pull up far fewer possibilities. So I'm going to set this back to the end because it's more likely to be a now you have 18 total of anybody who left Sweden. So here September and 88 would match. Who else do we have in here? Not looking at too many people here. Birth dates can be off by 1 or 2 days, so you might want to play with that. They can be off by more than 1 or 2 days, but what I'm saying is if you're relatively confident about it, then you're in pretty good shape. So in actuality, this is the record, September 7th. And it was an 88 departure. So left in May, got married in July. I do know the backstory of this one, of course. So he and his wife knew each other in Sweden, but for some reason didn't marry until they got to America. That's about it. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any questions about this, feel free to put them in the comments. I'm happy to try to answer them. I also offer free 20-minute Zoom calls for little questions you might have that I might be able to help with. I've got the link for how to do that in the description. Hope to see you next time. Take care.